Hi, welcome to another edition of Activate Worcester. As you know, what we've tried to do is give you subjects that have a distinctly local flavor and things that you won't see on other channels, whether they're Boston-based or Worcester-based. Tonight's no different. The slight difference that we're doing tonight, we're going to have not one, but two guests. The first half will be with one, etc., and our second guest will be equally interesting, as I think you'll agree. And I position these guys as the killer bees. This will be three people that we have that are running for office that we've had in the last several weeks. The first bee was Bill McCarthy, and the second of our killer bees is Brian O'Malley. And Brian will be telling you a little bit about himself in a moment, but just as an overview, Brian's going to be running, or is running, for state rep as a Republican in the 15th Worcester District. Brian is a longtime Worcester resident, father of three, a weirdo because he's been married for 25 years to the same lady. Yeah. Amazing, amazing. Also, Brian has roots, as they say in the Midwest. Academically, he's a Worcester State grad, now Worcester State University. It's been kicked up for you. Yes. And cum laude graduate. And he's a fascinating guy who basically wants to stop the increases in expenditures and look for ways to trim the fat off the bloated bureaucracy. And he has kind of another interesting thought. Remember, he's running as a Republican. But he's a guy who is really concerned about the plight of people who are having great difficulty in this economy and people who can't find a job. Now, why does he relate to that? Well, real simple. Early on in his life, in his married life, he was actually homeless for 8 months. So he can relate directly to those kinds of difficulties. And I welcome him. Brian O'Malley, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you to everybody here at Activate Worcester. It's great to be here today.
Glad to have you. Glad to have you. Obvious question is, with supporting a family, 3 kids, job, other activities, why are you running for the state rep's job?
Well, originally, Ron, I was going to run against Vinnie Pedoni, simply because he hasn't been opposed in quite a while, and the representatives from Worcester tend to be just rubber stamps for the leadership in Boston. Okay. I heard a story not too long ago from a state rep down on the South Shore, talking about one time where the Speaker of the House accidentally voted yes on a bill, and all the state reps, all the Democrats followed suit.
Absolutely.
And then he realized his mistake, and suddenly every light on the board changed. So if we have legislators like that, we could probably cut the House in half.
and save a whole bunch of money at the same time. It's an amazing thing,
And Worcester's the second biggest city in New England. It doesn't need to have a rubber stamp. Worcester shouldn't be settling for scraps that the people in Boston decide to give them.
Should be leading. It should be leading. There's no doubt. Why would you be the guy who can turn things around? In fact, just let's go back to the district itself. What are the physical parameters of the district?
Okay, the 15th, depending on the way we look at it, we'll start at Lake Ave, down near Sunderland Road, up Lake Ave, down Belmont and Shrewsbury Streets, through downtown, a little bit up over on half of Grafton Hill, through the downtown neighborhoods, and part of it actually touches Park Ave between May and Pleasant Streets.
Got it. So it's pretty all-encompassing. Lots of interesting demographics within that. And in fact, Brian is such a strong candidate that he's running unopposed, unlike his competitor, who I guess there were 4 or 5 different people that were involved in that primary.
Yeah, it was a 5-way
And they were all jockeying for position and so on and so forth to face this man. What do you see the primary differences between yourself and the individual who's going to be running on the Democratic ticket?
Well, my opponent has publicly stated that she wants to raise the income tax. She would like to raise the gas tax. And she thinks that we need to funnel that money into more social programs. Now, with my history, I've been a benefactor, so to speak, of some of these social programs. And there's a lot of waste and duplication of effort in those programs. So I don't think we need to raise taxes to improve those programs. I think we can cut some of the bloat out of bureaucracy. One of the things that I found was that if you're in a situation where you need assistance, you have to fill out 3 or 4 different applications, one for each different agency. Now, in this day and age, there's no reason why the state can't have one master form for you to fill out that every agency can tap into. That'll free up a lot of people that are processing paperwork.
Or just the redundancy across the board in managing the effort, which is a difficult thing. One of the things that I always find interesting is that when politicians are interested in more programs and so on and so forth, that by definition is not necessarily a good or a bad thing. What is a problem is that they very rarely, if ever, say, well, look, we have X number of dollars in assets right now. What we want to do is redeploy these.
Right.
In other words, if everything was absolutely flat, straight-lined, how would they juggle or rejuggle or redefine the budget? They never give you that. They'll tell you we need more for the children, so everybody nods their head because who's not for the children? Or schools, who's not for schools? Or for other social programs. All of that's fine and dandy in its place within reason, but explain to me what are the efficiencies that you're going to be bringing to it as well. Where's the fiscal sanity? Now, what are some of the things you see happening in terms of fiscal sanity that you're going to go to Beacon Hill and beat the drum for?
Well, like I said, that's one of the things that I was talking about, was just the duplication of effort in the social service industries. But also, I went to the registry the other day. You go to the registry, there's 4 empty booths, there's people waiting everywhere, it takes you forever to get through, the fees have doubled in the last few years. And I had a guy sitting next to me say to me, there's so much unemployment, why don't I hire some more people to work here? There's just some common sense solutions to, it's glad to see that they're finally fixing some of the roads in Worcester. But, some of these roads have been dug up for years, and they're suddenly, maybe it's because this year this district is actually has opposition, so they're paying some attention to it.
So things are happening. It's an amazing thing, an amazing thing. In terms of running, how long have you actually been out there shaking hands, banging on doors, and that sort of thing?
Well, I got all my signatures in May. Had some family issues in June and July, so I didn't get out there as much as I should have. But I've been out there pretty regularly since then, hitting key neighborhoods.
What are you hearing? What are they telling you?
I've had so many people just glad that there's a Republican on the ballot for a change. That is one of the reasons why I decided to run, is because I got tired of, this is an open seat, I got tired of seeing open seats that were unopposed. For instance, where I come from, the Gardner area, Congressman Neal out there, when he first got in because Bolin retired and no Republican got on the ballot. He hasn't had any real opposition in all this time until now.
Well, one of the things that Brian brings to the party, so to speak, he's really a working class citizen. He's somebody that's got his hand or his finger on the pulse of what's happening in the district. And one of the more interesting things that happened at the primary that we can talk about at this point is that the person who will be in fact on the ticket for the Democrats received approximately 4% of all the eligible voters who actually are in that district. Oddly enough, there were 5 people competing, lots and lots of publicity. Only 11% of all the registered voters came out that day and cast a vote. Of those 11% that voted, she received roughly 4%, a little bit over 4%. So what that means is that if people choose to vote with their duffs and stay home, you can have somebody that can literally steal an election. I'm not suggesting she steals anything.
Right.
But what I am saying is that if people out there are not active and they don't get out there, this is what can happen. And you're going to be paying these people $60,000, $70,000 a year. That's your tax dollars for somebody that really doesn't have an across-the-board representation. So the thing that we urge at Activate Worcester is become aware of the issues, become aware of the people, and once they're in office, stay on them. Call them up, write letters, whatever you have to do, but get active. Again, it's your tax dollars at work. And this is why, from our perspective, it's a wonderful thing to see folks actually getting involved. And again, running for office is not easy. You're a family man, you're a working man.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the biggest criticism I've had from anybody is why don't we see more of you out there campaigning? And it's because I have a real job, folks. I have to get time off from my boss sometimes to go campaign.
Yeah.
I can't just take a leave of absence from my job or just schedule my hours myself. I have to request vacation days.
Your annuity isn't kicking in at this point.
No, no.
Okay. Now, I think that the people who are watching the show are getting a definite vibe, a definite feeling for you. You're highly energetic, highly motivated. You want to make some things happen, and you want to do the right thing for people.
Right.
Okay. On balance, I'm giving you some thoughts here, but in your own words, why should they be considering a vote for a non-Democrat who hasn't held elective office before, is obviously aggressive and well-meaning, but in your own words, why should they be voting for you?
Well, Ron, people need to vote for me if they want to do what's right for the district and not just right for what their partisan feelings tell them to do. And that's one of the things that's ruining this country, it's messed up this state, is that everybody just wants to go party line. I mean, we see people like, say, Scott Brown, for instance, who doesn't always vote party line. I don't always like every way he votes, but he's an independent thinker, and he does what he thinks is best. And I think we need more of that in government. We don't need people that are just going to do what they're told, because if you, as the old saying goes, if everybody agrees, one of us isn't necessary.
It's well said. The Scott Brown thing is a particularly good analogy to draw. He has voted with the quote-unquote leadership of his party 54% of the time. Compare that to folks that are in the other party, if you will, and in fact with a lot of Republicans who are in lockstep with what their leadership has to say. One of the attractions that people have to Scott Brown is the fact that he provides leadership. He's not somebody who's leading from behind, as is a current phrase. This is a guy who's leading from the front and not necessarily in lockstep with his quote-unquote leadership. He's the leader. And that's the kind of thing that we need from our people at the state rep level, because it hasn't been there and hasn't been there for years.
That's right, Ron. I mean, one of the things I've always done, and anybody that's known me for years knows that I'm the type of person that looks to see what needs to be done and then works to get it done. I don't wait for somebody to tell me to do it. I don't wait to see what the popular thing is to do. I see what needs to be done, and I work to get it done. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes not, but that's life.
We like to see you given the opportunity, and folks, his name is Brian O'Malley. He's running in the 15th Worcester District. Get out there, support him. When you see him holding signs, beep the car horn and wave at him and tell you folks he's a good guy. He'll do the job for you. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ron.
Pleasure to have you.
All right,
Pleasure to have you. Okay, Brian, thanks very, very much. Now, through the magic of television, we have morphed Brian into another human being who you'll see in a moment. I started the show by mentioning about the killer bees, that we have 3 individuals that we've brought to you, all beginning with first name with a B. And we had we had Bill McCarthy, who's running for state rep. He was on 2 weeks ago. Earlier in this show, you saw the second B, Brian O'Malley, who's also running for state rep. And here's the third B. We have Bill LeBeau. Bill is running in Worcester's 17th district. And before we engage him in conversation, just some general information about him. Bill is a guy who lives in Leicester. Did I say it right?
Leicester.
Leicester, okay. Worked in Worcester. He's lived in Worcester. Married, 4 children.
No, divorced.
Divorced,
Sorry.
Same difference. 1 granddaughter, but also a Gulf War veteran, which nowadays it's kind of interesting how few veterans there are out there. And he's one of them, that's for sure. He's a former police officer, firefighter, truck driver, board of directors of Project New Hope, Quinsig in Assumption, studied criminal justice and business administration, and is very much involved, among other things, with veterans issues, which is kind of a hot button to me as well. And I'd like to welcome Bill, happily welcome him to the show. Bill?
All right, Ron, thanks for having me.
Glad you joined us.
Yeah.
We have, unfortunately, little more than 10 minutes to do the Bill LeBeau story. It's an interesting one. It's one that can go for well over an hour, and I've heard it. We don't have that much time, so what we'll do is kind of get into it as quickly as we can and begin at the beginning. Why are you running, or in his case, hobbling?
That's right.
For office? Bill has a, I don't know if we can get a camera on, it's pretty tough at this point. You can probably see it right there. Bill has a broken right foot, and it hasn't stopped him.
Right leg.
Right leg.
It's a fibula, that's right.
Broken fibula.
That's right.
And that happened how long ago?
4 weeks ago.
And you haven't been in mothballs. You've been out there.
Absolutely.
Running and gunning.
Absolutely. I was laid up. You know, there's no denying. The first week, it was definitely on the couch with a leg up and a lot of phone calls that week. But I've been hobbling around since after that, and a lot of the voters have seen me out there. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Hey, did you really break it, or you're just currying the?
Oh no, I'm sitting here in pain now, so it's broken. I just
Most people sitting in that seat are in pain to begin with because they're talking with us. You know,
I've been in foxholes. This is no big deal, Ron.
Sure, sure. Why are you doing this? Why are you running for office?
You know, seriously, on a serious note here, you know, back in April, I had joined the Leicester Republican Committee after working on Scott Brown's campaign. I was one of the volunteers, 16, 18-hour days for weeks leading up to the election. And I got interested in politics. Up until that point, I was a TV kicker. You know, and I think everybody knows what that means. And I got interested, and I joined our town committee out in Leicester. And I have a lot of friends here in Worcester. And I started looking around at our representation. You know, I didn't know who my representative was for a long time. I only moved in Leicester 10 years ago. I had to Google. I didn't know who he was. And I found out it was John Benenda, 26-year incumbent, and nobody had run against him in 12 years.
How long had you been living in Leicester?
9 to 10 years.
9 to 10 years, and you hadn't any idea
well,
who your rep was?
When I say I didn't know him, obviously I'd heard the name, but I had not ever met him.
But the visibility and so on and so forth.
No, I wouldn't recognize him. I had to Google him to know what he looked like. So, you know, I remember in 2010, I was pretty active with a lot of things going on and standouts and stuff. And I remember going into that ballot box and seeing, you know, once again, a state representative. It didn't matter who it was, unopposed. And I am a strong believer. I've been saying this in the Republican Party now for 3 years. We need to have open discussions about the issues that are affecting all of us. And when you have an opponent, or when you have a representative that's running unopposed, that's almost like an invitation to not talk about any issues in that whole district. And our district is almost 40,000 residents between Worcester and Leicester. We have almost 16 to 20,000 regular voters. And, you know, if they go 60%, we're talking 21, 22,000 voters. And to not have any discussions when we have the issues that are going on, I just think that was wrong. And I made a decision. It was a last-minute decision. And it was a few days, maybe a week, maybe 5, 6 days, somewhere in there before the deadline. And I got a bunch of people together. I was actually making phone calls for Scott Brown at that time. And I said, hey, I think I'm going to do this. And immediately there was just a wave of, wow, yeah, let's do it.
Finally.
Finally. Yeah. And in 4 days, we got 275 signatures. Now, I only turned in 200.
You have a large family then, huh?
No, I wasn't. You know what? I'm going to tell you, a lot of my family, they're hardworking folks. They don't have time to be bothering with stuff like that. I think a lot of people understand what I'm talking about there. But we pounded the neighborhood, and we only turned in 200 because 75 of those signatures were people who hadn't registered yet, or they were Democrats, and they couldn't sign the sheet. And we ran into that a lot, and it's been continuing to now.
Now, when did you actually start to, as they say, press the flesh or do retail politics?
Oh, right there.
And
right
that
there.
was
last week of April, April 25th.
So you've really been doing this for roughly 4 or 5 months, whatever it is?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
You said earlier that there's how many people that live in the district? 40,000?
Around 40,000.
It's a lot. How many have you been able to meet with at this point?
To meet with personally?
Or knock on doors, visit with, and so on and so forth?
Unfortunately, the door knocking hasn't been as easy. I was working a long stretch of hours before I broke my leg. You know, you say things happen. Actually, the broken leg actually helped me with the campaign because my job as a truck driver, I was working for a small company out in Brimfield. I was going from Massachusetts to Jersey every day, back and forth. So I was trying to campaign at night. So in actuality, when we look at our numbers, I have had some volunteers out there. We're roughly around 1,200 to 1,400 doors that we've actually knocked on and had. We've also dropped a lot of cards. Anywhere I go, I'm dropping cards. What I'm really happy about with my campaign, I have dedicated volunteers at the phone bank at the Mass Victory office at 18 Grafton Street, and we just topped 5,000 phone calls in this race this week.
Wow.
And that's voicemail, that's messaging, and that's live talking to people. So we actually have some pretty solid poll results based on those calls.
What kind of responses are you getting from people?
We're getting a lot of similar responses no matter who we're talking to. It doesn't matter what culture we're dealing with. It doesn't matter what the economics are. People are nervous. Jobs, 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 jobs. There has not been enough, and I know what they're claiming, that it's 6.1%, but I'm going to tell you a little anecdote. We bought our house 3 years ago, and the day after, my girlfriend lost her job. And she's been out of work. She had to go back to school and retrain. She ran out of her benefits. They take her off the rolls. They don't count her. And we have thousands of residents in this state right now in that situation, not being counted. Or they go back to jobs that they didn't think they'd have to go back to, like truck driving. Or they're taking part-time jobs, maybe 2 or 3. This is happening all over the place. And we have a lot of empty storefronts. As a matter of fact, driving in here, in part of my district, I'm looking at empty storefronts.
Everywhere you go.
Everywhere we go. And people know this. And, you know, I look at our representation in Boston, and I'm not talking about just my opponent, because there's a supermajority there. And with that supermajority, we have some Republicans who maybe aren't working as hard as they should be, because, oh, they're the majority. Or we have a lot of Democrats that they know what they're going to get, and they just say, well, what does the Speaker want me to vote today? And I'll just do that. And in the meantime, they're getting their per diems, they're getting the perks, they're getting the salary. But what are we getting back? Well, I'll tell you a couple things, Ron, if you bear with me.
Please.
We have $110,000 a year parking attendants at Logan Airport.
It's a tough job.
Basic pay of $56,000. Think about that. All my union friends out there, because I'm a pro-union guy, believe it or not. I've heard this on the street. You're a Republican, you must hate union. No. I actually tried to organize a union at Assumption. It didn't really work out too well, but it's okay. It's just the way it is. But $56,000 to collect the little tabs coming off at the little parking, and half of that's automated? That's $2,000 more than the average salary of a JetBlue pilot. Think about that, folks. This is going on throughout our state government. I've been blogging about it. I've been calling into radio shows about this stuff. The MBTA, big problem. We bailed them out for, what, $48, $49 million this year. Tim Murray, our Tim Murray, has said he thinks they're underfunded the next 5 years out of $1 billion. They're coming back for more, folks. And they have over 29 separate union contracts they're dealing with. And as late as 2009, we have over 500 employees at the MBTA, including bus drivers and truck drivers and dock workers, who are making over $100,000. Now, I have no problem with what people make as far as salary, but if we can't afford things, we need to start looking at this. We have fixed income people in this district, the 17th, Webster Square Towers. They have Social Security was frozen for 3 years. 3 years. Our sales tax went up. We have these salaries that are just sitting there. They keep going up. Even if they go up 1%, they're going up. Private sector, we're losing jobs. Fixed income, they're seeing their cost of living go up. Look at the price of gas right now in the last 2 years. It's hurting people. The policies in Boston are hurting the citizens of the district. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, our representative, who I've heard nothing but great things about, I got to tell you that, nothing but great things. But in the last 6 to 7 years, I'm getting a lot of, well, I haven't really heard from him in a long time. And then you look at the votes and you realize it's you know, things that maybe people aren't really in agreement with. Like the latest one was just privatize daycare centers, whether you're at your home or the worker and the daycare owner are now unionized in Massachusetts. These are things that hurt small business. They're things that hurt. Look at the single mom that has to bring her kids to those neighborhoods. Now she's going to have to go and bring them to a bigger one. It's going to cost more. And there's a waiting. This is what you asked me why I'm jumping, and I think you get a good idea.
I hear you. I hear you. It's a sad state of affairs that we're in, to tell you the truth. Why should folks at this point be taking a shot on a relative newcomer as opposed to going with the tried and true guy who they know, who's got 400 grand in his pocket, that he can outspend you 200 to 1? Why should they be going with you?
Well, first of all, let's address that right up front. I don't really necessarily worry about how much money my opponent has, because really, what can he spend it on? Negative ads? I don't think the electorate really wants to go there. They're tired of it. Is it going to be on his record? Well, if it's going to be more high taxes, high fees, unfunded mandates, and cuts in services, let him spend all $422,000 on that message. Our message is better. My message is better. You know, I don't come here just complaining about the way things are. I have a plan. Even as a state representative, there's only 160. But I know that there's people on the other side of the aisle that I know personally. I know people on this side of the aisle that I can work with, that have common sense. And that's what we've got to bring. I want to bring common sense solutions, form coalitions, even if it's outside of leadership, and say, look, blocks like the 14. Remember when the Senate was going to do the nuclear option? Senate was going to do that nuclear option. They got the 14 senators. They got a lot done. And we have reasonable people at the State House. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what side of the aisle. And you're going to need to get people like myself, regular working folks that can get in there and actually work together and get things done.
Speaking of working and activating, we're trying to activate Worcester with this overall program. How do people get in touch with you? How do they support you?
Absolutely. It's www.lebeauforrep.com. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. My email is lebeauforrep, the number 4, lebeau, the number 4, rep.com. You can call me. It's 774-312-4198. I will talk to any constituent, and, you know, I'm here, folks. I'm here to talk about the issues, and let's get this going. We've been rolling, so.
What I can say in my knowledge of Bill is very real. He's very sincere. And if you give him a shot, he'll work harder for you than anybody ever has. Remember, Bill LeBeau, 17th Worcester District. Help him out. Vote for him. Tell your folks, your friends, get behind him as well. You won't regret it. And thank you for joining us.
All right.